it would seem like a lot of the world is fans of Formula One now, or at least getting into it. Now, I've been into it for a very long time. Actually, I grew up with it with my old man. So today we are going to be looking at 10 worst crashes in F1 history. And I imagine there's going to be some brutal ones in here, because I know that there are some. So, let's go.
And the roll hoop and the halo
Silverstone.
very much doing its job before the car digs in, and you do not ever want to see accidents like that.
Welcome
Mad.
to Watch Mojo, and today we're looking at the 10 worst crashes in F1 history.
Big fire there as they exited out of turn
Worst
3.
fire in modern history
Very nasty
in F1.
Indeed, and unsurprisingly, that is a red
Mad that he got out,
For this
okay.
list, we're looking at the most devastating crashes to take place in F1. Sadly, because some of these crashes resulted in deaths, a content warning is now in effect. Which of these
Yeah.
crashes had you covering your
Senna.
eyes?
I
Be sure
remember
to let
watching
us
that
know
race.
in the comments.
It was horrible.
Lorenzo Bandini at the 1967 Monaco Grand Prix. At the 1967 Monaco Grand Prix, Lorenzo Bandini was trailing in second place behind Denny Hulme when he lost control of the vehicle and
This one
crashed.
goes in there.
Now Bandini. Bandini's crashed.
Ooh.
Look at that. The car, it looks like it's upside down, Phil.
The car flipped and its fuel tank broke, which resulted in the
Mad.
car bursting into flames. Marshall struggled with rescuing Bandini as the flames constantly grew and made the task all the more difficult. Although
Yeah.
Bandini was eventually pulled out of the vehicle, he had still sustained third-degree burns. He
Yeesh.
was taken to the hospital, but sadly he passed away 3 days later. He was 31 years of age. Gilles Villeneuve, the 1982
Gilles
Belgian Grand Prix.
Villeneuve.
Near
Jeepers.
the end of the qualifier session of this edition of the Belgian Grand Prix, Gilles Villeneuve aimed to improve his position and lap time, so he attempted to cut another racer. There
mad
was
to
clearly
think his
confusion
son
as
races
to which
the
side
race
he should
anyway.
complete the maneuver. He
He's just
went
flipped.
right
Wow,
and
that's
hit
ruined.
the vehicle he attempted to pass. Villeneuve's car flipped several times, and the subsequent
Is he?
impact
I
was
thought
so
that was him that's
devastating.
blown out.
It resulted in Villeneuve being launched out of the vehicle.
He was thrown out. Where
rushed
is
to
he?
the hospital, but hours later it was announced that he had passed away. Jules
Vegas.
Bianchi, the 2014 Japanese Grand Prix.
Remember
In
seeing this?
F1 races, one crash often leads to another, but
It was such a
none have been
freak.
under such unusual circumstances. During a lap
Yeah.
of this race, as a result of weather conditions, Sauber's Adrian Sutil would go off the track and hit a wall. A crane was used by marshals to remove the vehicle.
Right, so it's worth noting this crane actually has got back through. I think there's a gap in the right hand side of the tires where there's like a little bit of a board on the far right hand side, and that
During
crane,
the removal process,
Yeah.
Marusha's Jules Bianchi wound up driving
it's just horrendous. Everything is against Jules in this one because it's such a wet track and he can't slow down. And the shape of the back end of the tractor and then the shape of the front end of the car, it just
directly into the crane. He was unconscious and was subsequently placed in
it couldn't have been a worse
He later
combination.
passed away as a result of the head injuries he
events.
sustained during the accident.
He will
Horrible.
be much missed in the Formula One paddock.
But thankfully, if thankfully such a thing, as a result of Jules's accident, that's where you get the Halo device now.
Ronnie Peterson, the 1978 Italian Grand Prix. Crashing the vehicle he was meant to drive at the race during a practice session, Team Lotus's Ronnie Peterson was forced to drive an older model instead. Along with his vehicle facing technical difficulties, the main race began as the flag was dropped before all the cars were in their respective positions. The ensuing havoc and confusion
Carnage
caused by the
behind,
error
look.
resulted in Peterson's vehicle colliding with a McLaren driven by James Hunt.
Man, whoa.
Peterson's Lotus would then hit a barrier and burst into flames. Hunt and several crew members were able to get Peterson out of the vehicle and he was rushed to the hospital. The next morning, Peterson was pronounced dead as a result of a fat embolism.
That's
Romain
mental.
Grosjean, the
It's Roman Grosjean. Like, why do Americans have to try and do this pronunciation thing, man? Now, this is, yeah, watch this. This is just
2020 Grand
horrible.
Prix.
You see the onboard? Straight on into the
First
barrier.
lap of this race, Romain Grosjean's vehicle clipped Daniel Kvyat's AlphaTauri's left front wheel.
So, what I'm going to say here, you see this bit here where it says AlphaTauri fashion? It's got the number 26 on it. So that's the halo. It goes around the front of the driver. It's actually, as a result of the Jules Bianchi crash that you saw where he hit the back of that tractor, this is what came of it. And the safety in this saves Grosjean in this accident,
Grosjean's
like without a
car was
doubt.
sent reeling and crashed into a metal barrier.
It's just
it was sliced
crazy.
in half and caught on fire.
That's extraordinary. Yeah.
It's just the car
It's gone through the barrier, you see. The car's gone through the barrier.
Despite all odds,
So what you see, if you can just see it, so there's a bit of a gap in the barrier where you can see like the track one side and sort of daylight the other way. So what's actually happened is, if this is your barrier, where are we here? The car has come through, pierced the barrier like this, and then it's split in half. And that device, that the halo as we call it, means that as the car's gone through the barrier here, boom, the device has given enough room so that Grosjean hasn't lost his head. Like, it was, could have been so much worse.
Race boot,
I mean, granted,
escaped the vehicle and
there's so much fire in this accident. Look, I mean,
he left relatively unscathed, having
Now-
only
so this is something else. So the left-hand side, the car that you see there on the left-hand side of the screen, that's supposed to be the fuel cell. That's supposed to contain all the fuel. So if the car does split like this, the back end is supposed to burn, and the front end, where the driver would be, which is where those fire marshals are, the front end's supposed to be fine. The front end's supposed to be safe. But so much happened where it severed fuel lines and ignited fuel and just
only suffered minor burns and spraining his left ankle. Having only
worst
been inside the
accident
vehicle
ever
28 seconds after the crash had occurred,
in modern
it's
times.
really a miracle
It's-
that he survived and was able to escape an almost certain fate.
And the thing is, like, you see his hands are burnt. So there's reasons that his hands are burnt are because his hands and his feet touch the metal barrier. That's literally what they're saying is the only real reason that there's that much burning on his hands and feet.
Inside the vehicle a mere 28
Absolutely mad.
seconds
Modern
after
safety.
the crash had occurred, it is truly a miracle that he survived and was able to escape.
He's racing in
an
Indy now,
almost
as far as I'm
certain
aware.
fate.
I thought about my kids and I said, no, I cannot die today.
Alberto Ascari, the 1955 Monaco Grand Prix. Trailing behind Sterling Moss in this race for the lead, Alberto Ascari was in luck when the engine of Moss's Mercedes broke down. The opportunity to take the lead, however, was missed.
Look at his cars,
as
man.
Ascari's vehicle swerved out of control, crashed through a barrier and directly into the Mediterranean Sea.
Ascari has overshot
That's the one that went into the sea.
The car has somersaulted straight into the harbour.
The car sank, but fans breathed a sigh of relief when Ascari appeared on the surface. He was subsequently rescued and hauled out of the water.
Crazy.
Launch has picked Ascari up, and he is brought over to the harbour side, where an ambulance is waiting.
Despite the harsh nature of the crash, Ascari came out of the whole ordeal with a broken nose.
He's
and
looking
some
all right.
bruises. Wolfgang von Trips, the 1961 Italian Grand Prix.
Look at that mess,
On the
man.
second lap of the Italian Grand Prix race in 1961, two cars on the track came in contact with one another. While one of the cars, driven by Jim Clark, came to a halt, the other, driven by
Did not.
Wolfgang von Trips, was spinning out of control and
There it
struck
goes.
a section of spectators.
Whoa, jeepers.
15 of whom were killed. Von Trips was thrown
That's a
out of
rough
the vehicle
accident.
and did not survive the accident. Despite this
days.
horrific sequence of events, the race continued, and Von Tripp's teammate, Phil Hill,
That's
went on
mad.
to win the race. Some drivers only became aware of the crash and its severity after the race, leaving many to question why it had not been stopped. Niki Lauda, the 1976 German Grand Prix.
This was
One of the
incredible.
greatest and biggest stars to ever get behind the wheel. This Austrian legend was involved in one of the most horrific accidents in F1 history. During the second lap of the race, out of nowhere,
Bang.
Lauda's car swerved out of control and caught on fire. Several drivers and staff assisted in pulling Lauda out of the vehicle, but despite escaping, he received severe burns all over.
And the initial prognosis was that he had little chance of survival. The nature of his injuries was such that a priest was called to administer the last rites.
Even
Imagine
though he
that,
was in
a
critical condition
priest.
and went into a coma, Lauda remarkably survived the ordeal and would make an incredible comeback after 6 weeks.
He was
later
determined.
went on to win 2 more world titles.
There's a good thing about that is if you watch the film of James Hunt and Niki Lauda, it's like heavily influenced by what Niki Lauda actually went through, so you get to understand just how crazy that
Ronnie
was.
Ratzenberger, the 1994 San Marino Grand
Worst weekend in Formula One history, 1994 San Marino, Imola.
Prix.
At the conclusion of this afternoon's final qualifying session for tomorrow's San Marino Grand Prix, I sadly have to report that the news is bad.
During a qualifying session of the San Marino Grand Prix in 1994, the
Horrible
nose
day.
ring of this 31-year-old's vehicle had gotten detached. The car subsequently went off the track and slammed directly into a barrier. Ratzenberger had suffered a skull fracture so severe he was pronounced dead shortly after medical staff arrived at the site of the crash.
There's
It's the
Nicky.
first time that we have to face a dead Formula One driver for our generation. The whole atmosphere was very heavy that afternoon, you know, and everybody was thinking about what are we doing here, or what's the point, you know?
Horrible
Worst
weekend,
of
man.
all, many
Horrible
believe
weekend.
the tragedy could have been prevented, as Ratzenberger was aware of the issue with his vehicle, but opted to complete another lap instead. Unfortunately, this wouldn't be the last tragedy to take place at the 1994 Grand Prix in San Marino. Before we continue, be sure to
Come on,
subscribe
man.
to our channel and
can't
ring
do
the
that.
bell to get
Right, so what they haven't told you is it was something like on the Friday practice session, I think it was Rubens Barrichello. He had a huge crash at San Marino. Then, like, you had Ratzenberg. He's had his fatal crash. And then we got onto race day with Ayrton Senna. And I remember watching this on TV with my old man.
for San Marino Grand Prix.
Absolutely mental. It really was.
On lap 7 of the main race, Brazilian and 3-time champ Ayrton Senna had taken a comfortable lead over Benetton's Michael Schumacher. At one point coming up on the corner, he attempted to make a turn, only for
Just
his
didn't
vehicle
turn.
to skid off the track and crash into a wall. The accident was so devastating,
Horrible.
the car's front wheel and nose were torn off.
Ayrton ran out of luck. He did not have a broken bone in his body. He did not have any bruising. If that piece of assembly would have gone 6 inches higher or 6 inches lower, he would have
He'd have
walked
been
back
fine.
to the paddock.
Although he was pulled out of the vehicle, he was in critical condition, and despite receiving medical treatment, it was to no avail, and he passed away later that evening.
He was special.
Absolutely horrendous.
He was not 1 step. He was 2 steps better than everyone else.
Did you enjoy
The thing was, okay, so what they haven't told you is when Ayrton Senna crashed his car, what they say is the bit of the assembly would have been higher up. The rumors has it that it basically went through the skull, went through his helmet. And what was really like doubly bubbly was he had the flag of Ratzenberger's, I think he was Brazilian. He couldn't, well, anyway, he had the country of Ratzenberger's flag in the car. And the whole idea was when Senna was finishing, when he was going to win, he was going to hold it out as a respect for Ratzenberger. But obviously, it never happened. But thankfully, as the years have progressed with Formula One, safety of the car, safety of the driver, it's got a lot better. It has got a lot better, without a doubt. Now, I'm from a generation where you used to, like, a bit of a crash used to be exciting. You never wanted to see anybody die. You never wanted to see anybody killed. But with, thankfully, the developments in all these different safety aspects and stuff, you get a lot better safety and hopefully you get a better racing driver out of it. But yeah, that's Formula One for you. Crazy. Absolutely crazy. There's a lot in there that weren't in there, but yeah. Take it easy. Peace out. See you again next time. Bye.